Grant Wiggins and Jane McTighe first introduced the Understanding by Design model, from now on I'll refer to that as UbD, also known as the Backward Design model, in 1998. UbD is not a program, but rather it's a way of thinking that allows teachers to target their pedagogical approach and activities with the end goal in mind. Put simply, UbD framework requires teachers to work backwards, focusing first on the final learning outcomes and objectives, then identifying the necessary evidence required for students to demonstrate their understanding of the information, as well as how it's going to be assessed, and then finally move to the development of specific lessons and instructional activities. So what is the primary UbD end goal? Well, in a word, understanding. Yet according to UbD, the model, understanding is not simply regurgitating information. True understanding is demonstrated when students autonomously make sense of information or concepts taught and then transfer and apply their learning to new and real situations. So let's now examine these stages one at a time. The first one is identify desired results or outcome. In the first stage of the UbD framework, we consider the concept of the big idea. That is, what we want students to know and understand by the end of the unit, and the transferable and enduring goals that this knowledge will enable. An idea is considered big if it allows students to make sense of seemingly isolated and sometimes confusing facts and brings them together in a way that makes sense. And the big idea for my unit is how we live impacts the environment. The UbD framework in stage 1 also requires teachers to set clear learning objectives, that is, what they want the students to understand, know by the end of the unit, and the specific skills that students will gain. So at the conclusion of this unit, my students will understand that firstly, people and the environment are interdependent. Secondly, people have different opinions about how the environment should be treated. And thirdly, they can act to make changes that can work towards the creation of a more sustainable environment. At the conclusion of this unit, my students will know that our actions impact the environment, that people's attitudes impact their behaviour, and thirdly, the steps to conduct a research project. At the conclusion of the unit, the students will have the necessary skills to, firstly, research a topic and cite supporting evidence. They will also have the skills to conduct a research project, to create a digital media, and fourthly, to plan, compose, review and publish a persuasive text. Now, in line with the UbD framework, this unit of work will have outcomes from the geography, English, mathematics and science and technology syllabuses. To assist students understand the big idea and achieve the identified learning objectives and outcomes, we need what Wiggins and McTighe referred to as essential questions. Essential questions are open-ended and require students to research them in order to gain evidence and arrive at a decision. Each question provides more information about the big idea. The essential questions that I have chosen that align with the big idea are, firstly, how does the environment support people and other living things? Secondly, why are trees important for humans? Next, what happens when we destroy the habitat of living things? Next, how do people's attitudes about the environment influence their actions? And lastly, what can you do to create a more sustainable environment? Now we move on to stage 2, determine evidence of student understanding. The second stage of the UbD model requires the teacher to visualize what students will do to understand the big idea and how their learning can be assessed. The UbD model divides assessment of evidence into two categories, performance tasks and other evidence. Some examples of other evidence include quizzes, tests, observations and work samples. Performance tasks require the students to demonstrate a skill or produce something that reveals evidence that they understand the concept and can transfer that knowledge or that skill to a different situation. In the UbD framework, 6 facets of understanding are seen as demonstrating true learning. And whilst teachers are not expected to use all 6 in every assessment, when true learning has occurred, students can explain, interpret and apply concepts, information and skills, as well as demonstrate that people can hold different perspectives on topics. In addition, students will display empathy and seek to walk in another person's shoes in order to better understand their opinion. And finally, students will have self-knowledge. Now this is sometimes referred to as metacognitive awareness, and it's the ability to reflect on the experience and its meaning using self-regulated thinking. Now Wiggins and McTighe also suggest the use of rubrics that allow for students to demonstrate varying degrees of understanding as a way of assessing. Okay, let's go ahead and put this information into a concrete task. Now I have employed the acronym GRASPS, which is adapted from Wiggins and McTighe to help guide the performance tasks. The first one, goal. The goal is for students to understand how we live our lives impacts the environment. The role of the students will be scientists and environmentalists who have investigated the current plague of flying foxes. The audience, well, that's going to be the local council. The situation. Human impact is exemplified by the recent explosion of flying foxes in our area. Students will use this as a starting point to further explore how people's actions impact the environment and to devise sustainable solutions. The next heading of this is product. Now students in small groups will create a blended digital media to explain the current flying fox problem and offer multiple perspectives of how to rectify it. Students will also have the option, instead of doing the blended digital media, to write a letter designed to persuade and provide evidence of how human action has caused the current problem in our community and offer environmentally friendly solutions for the problem. Final part of the acronym is S, and that's going to stand for standards. And our students will need to provide clear evidence of who their audience is and why they have chosen that audience. Secondly, to provide clear and concise information on the current flying fox problem. Next, students will provide evidence of what caused the problem, followed by different perspectives of how to solve the problem, and use persuasive words or imagery in either their blended media or in their letter, and use correct spelling. With regard to other evidence that will be used to assess students' understanding, the first one will include regular class quizzes on the flying fox problem. Students will also have a written multiple choice test on what has caused the current problem. I'll also observe students during class discussions and listen to their responses. And finally, there'll be work samples that I'll collect. We're now going to move on to stage 3 of the UbD framework, where teachers plan learning experiences and instruction. In stage 3, it's important to note that all activities and learning experiences align with the big idea and the outcomes discussed in stage 1. Secondly, that the learning experiences support students to understand the big idea and all the essential questions. Next, that they cultivate knowledge and skills that can be transferred to new situations, as well as allow for progress of knowledge and skills to be monitored. Next, that the learning experiences are presented in a sequence that optimizes student understanding. Final 2 points I'd like to make on learning experiences are firstly, that the lessons are differentiated, catering for all students and learning needs. And finally, that students are able to be assessed in accordance with stage 2 based on the learning experiences. Now, an excellent tool to help with planning learning experiences is a tool produced by Kath Murdoch, and it's called 6 Phases of Inquiry, and it's designed to guide the sequence and focus of each lesson. And phase 1 of the 6 is tuning in. Here the teacher seeks to engage students' attention and interest in the topic and assess students' existing knowledge and possible alternate conceptions. Phase 2 is titled Prepare to Find Out. Here the teacher reviews students' responses in the last lesson and introduces focused questions to prompt discussion and reflection. Phase 3 is titled Finding Out. Here the teacher provides experiences and factual information about the topic to increase students' knowledge base. This could include internet searches, interviews, listening to experts speak either live or in video clips and documentaries, or for students to personally observe the phenomena. The next phase is titled Sorting Out. Here students begin to organise, analyse possible theories for the topic, and formally or informally communicate the information that they have gathered. The teacher should also encourage students to reflect on the information and how it relates back to the big idea. The next phase is titled Going Further. Here, the lessons provide students the opportunity to pursue issues or questions of interest to them that relates back to the essential questions or the big idea. And this can be done either on their own, in pairs, or even in small groups. The final phase is making connections and taking action. Whilst making connections is in phase 6, connections back to the big idea should be communicated throughout the unit. That said, in this stage, students should be asked, what do you think the topic is about, and what is its connection to our big idea? And then, based on this information, the follow-up question should be, what action can or should you take to address the problem? It is envisaged that this integrated inquiry-based unit of work will take place over a period of 10 weeks.